Welcome to another episode of Leaders and Founders Podcasts. I'm very glad to be joined by the wonderful Jas Shah this week, fintech and product consultant and expert.
Oh, nice.
Jas, thank you for joining us.
Awesome, great to be here.
I will leave it to you to give a bit of an intro on yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it as short as possible, but it'll probably be quite lengthy because it's been a while. So I'm a computer science grad. I call myself a reformed engineer. I mean, I kind of wrote code for about a year. Most engineers wouldn't say I'm an engineer if I've only been doing it in the wild for a year, but computer science grad. I think my first foray into financial services was in 2007 when I did an industrial placement as part of my degree, and I did it at a pharmaceutical company. So I was in like the data analytics team, which was quite cool, looking at clinical trials and analysing data points of drugs that they had out at GPs, looking at the data points and then giving it to clinical trial specialists for review. All this like double-blind studies, charts on like what placebo drugs and all that kind of stuff. It's quite fun. But lots of my friends who were doing economics and international business with French were working at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Soc Gen, and I was like, oh, what's this banking thing that you're doing? And he's like, oh, I'm a middle office person. And I was just asking a few of my friends, what are they doing? What is it? And I got into it. I was quite interested in the complexity. I was kind of asking about the technology. And so when I graduated in 2008, I was like, oh, financial services is a cool place to kind of get involved. There's clearly lots of technological applications. And quickly realised, 2008 is probably not a great time to
Not the best time to get into finance.
It was a very bad time. It was probably 4 months after I graduated. It was 4 or 5 months of, this is quite hard. Every door I'm knocking at, they're saying the inn is closed. We're not hiring anyone. We're especially not hiring graduates. It's not the right time. But I landed a job as a front office application developer. They call it RAD development, which is just using whatever basically tools you can get your hands on, usually spreadsheets, access databases, and using VB and .NET to spin up applications for traders and desk heads. So that's how I got into it. And then I fortunately got onto the Citibank grad program. So I was there for five and a half years, building tech in their investment banking division, which was very, very cool. It's like my big experience of tech inside of a big organization, and they were one of the biggest organizations. And then I worked at Schroders for 2.5 years, Fidelity for about the same 2.5 years, building tech inside those organizations. 2017 decided to go solo. A few friends and colleagues were building cool stuff in fintech, and then I was just helping them on a freelance basis, and that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
It's going okay.
Yeah, it's going all right.
Yeah.
Reasonably successful. Yeah.
Why did you make that switch from, I guess, software and coding to product fully?
The honest answer is I was an okay engineer. That's at Hermes, not the bag brand, the pension fund manager that I worked at first. I worked with some really good engineers, and I was quite good there. And then when I went to Citibank, I realised, like these guys are on another level. They're doing stuff that I'm just like, I get it. I just don't think I'd be able to get to that level. And also, I was more interested in how are traders, desk heads, strategy leads on the investment side using the tech. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? I was more interested in that side of things. So that was kind of my basically once I left Hermes, I was like, right, I kind of want to get out of engineering a little bit. So I was a hybrid engineer analyst.
Nice segue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some people call it the purists route to product, where you've got all of the technical knowledge, and you're interested in requirements discovery, customer experience, what the end user wants and needs. So I spent, I think, a year working on in a data team, but trying to understand how do traders use this data, how to stack the order of different data feeds, and then I slowly moved more into a BA, and then product, and then product up the stack, really.
Okay. So you mentioned there about having that full understanding and a purist route. Do you think that's important to be successful in embedding product and really embracing it?
I think maybe it used to be. I think it's less and less so now, to be honest. I think with lots of the tools that there are out there, you can spin up a PRD or a BRD and like basically get an AI agent to create some requirements for you if you've got a basic understanding of what you want and need. I don't think you really need that technical knowledge, especially when there's non-technical people building products with 2 or 3 prompts and some
Vibe coding for the
yeah,
win.
vibe coding. It's always difficult to tell what is a trend and what is a fad. I do think this is going to be a long-term trend rather than a fad. I think more and more people will spin up bespoke apps.
Will they be any good though?
That's the question. I think the good ones are the ones that have the fundamentals of product baked into them. So I'm vibe coding and I'm spinning up an MVP, but I'm doing that so I can test with customers in a community that I'm starting to nurture and build, because it's more difficult to build a community through AI. I think that community building, the understanding of requirements, having face-to-face interaction is still needed, even in the vibe coding space. So I think that's the stuff that the product fundamentals will be core to even the vibe coding generation, if that's what we're calling it.
We've touched on it, so we may as well go into it fully. AI.
Yeah.
How is that going to? I guess we can go further onto fintech maybe a bit later on, but specifically product. How is that going to impact that as a function?
I think it already is. I think there's lots of product people I speak to who don't create user stories from scratch now. They will input some of their requirements into an engine, a prompt like Claude or ChatGPT, and say, build me user stories for this epic, and then the user stories will be built out, and then they'll tweak them. So I think it's already there. I don't know any PMs who like reach out to me in chat, or who I've spoken with, or clients, or a part of client teams who are not using it, even if they're not very vocal about how they're using it. They are definitely using
Just
it.
on the sly.
Exactly. There's like a video of someone typing in ChatGPT, and then their manager comes and they're like, minimize the screen and then go back into a Word document, and they're like, yeah, I'm totally doing this by myself. Yeah. So I think there's lots of that, but it's already embedded into what product folks are doing. Again, like requirements, spinning up research. So having 15 different white papers of, let's say, what Gen Z habits are in Saudi Arabia, what they're doing, what their needs are, putting it into ChatGPT, clicking deep research and saying, build out a bespoke white paper that will act as market research for a product, but like outline all the jobs to be done from these 6 research papers, give it these headers and these sections, and then here's the branding. I mean, that you can do customer research like that. I wouldn't advise purely relying on that, because there is hallucination, but I think there's lots of folks doing that, using that to kind of underpin their function.
Do you think it'll make it, I guess, higher performing, better output from product teams, run things a bit leaner, or not?
I mean, in theory, it should. It should, and then I think people speculate, oh, is AI the end of product management? Yeah, maybe.
I said that about everything there, coding and
That's it, yeah.
UX, UI.
Yeah.
If you listen to LinkedIn, I think pretty much every job in the world is going to go, and we're all going to have to become prompt engineers.
And I exclusively listen to LinkedIn, so
Yeah.
that's
Good source of news.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's difficult to tell how impactful it's going to be, but I think it does make it easier for an engineer, for example, or like a CEO, CTO, to do more work without a dedicated product person, which is good because you're spending less funding up front on dedicated resources. You can create more of a product yourself before and prove the proposition before you raise a big seed round or a Series A, and then you can bring product team in. I think what will end up happening is product folks will be further down that journey.
But are you able to get product market fit though if you don't have somebody to really guide that and you're relying on AI?
Yeah, because I mean, for those early stage, especially for those early stage startups, it's usually either the CEO or the CTO is the product person. I think that's what some folks forget. They're like, oh, well, there's no product people. Well, the CEO. If you look at all of the products, the fintech products out there, Stripe, Wise, Monzo, Starling, Revolut, like all of the founders have themselves been the product person, even though they didn't necessarily have the title, chief product officer, head of product, whatever the title is. They themselves have been the product person. They've experienced the problem themselves. They've gone out and done the research themselves. They've kind of hired a CTO and then co-built a proposition, gone and tested it, and looked at feedback and baked that into the product and then iterated. So usually on the very early stage propositions, the CEO or sometimes the CTO is a hybrid product person. So I think it's not that much different. I think just those people will have access to more tools and, in theory, be able to bake in product fundamentals at scale faster, rather than, oh, I'm doing a little bit of research here, I've proved it a little bit. Oh, here's a research deck, but it's basically a slide deck with 4 slides of research. They can now do comprehensive research with an AI helper. So I think, again, dedicated product functions and product people maybe move slightly further down that product development journey, especially when startups start to scale up.
And how important do you think it is for the later stage businesses to have that product representation on execo or just on the board? Because I've spoken to people recently who perhaps don't have that, and it's very hard for them to actually have a voice and be heard by the board.
I mean, I'm very biased.
Of course. I assumed your answer would be one way, but I'm interested to hear.
Yeah. It's 100% necessary to have a product person on your board. And guess what? I'm available. I mean, again, usually people in the board have some experience, but I agree. I've seen so many boards and so many like groups of NEDs at very technical, very like even consumer facing products that don't have a dedicated person with product experience there. And maybe it's it is that friction of, well, the CEO is kind of a bit of that product person when you've got a board, and you don't really want the CEO to feel like they're.
But is it that they are or they think they are?
Well, it's sometimes a bit of both.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. Sometimes they are, but they also think they're better than they are. But I think sometimes that friction comes into it. But I would always say, yeah, if you can get a product person on your board, I think it gives a completely different viewpoint, and I think it's very important to drive and steer the direction. And again, if you look at all of the successful startups like Stripe, for example, the Collison brothers, they had access. They weren't necessarily product people on their board, but they had access to that network of people who had built, launched, scaled, and sold products before. And they would regularly have lunches, conversations with those people off the books. But again, it is important to make that more official and have that person in the room on a monthly basis, just to bounce ideas off them, I think.
And if somebody was to say to you, why should I have a product person on my board?
Yeah.
What clear outcomes could you give to them that would say, right, this is exactly why you should have it. This is what will improve within your business.
I mean, these boards are usually sounding boards. That's why I say they're sounding. They're not going to say, oh, I'm going to build out a roadmap for you. Board members don't usually build out tangible things. It's more of here's a series of experts who you can go speak to and bounce ideas off and understand, look, we've got 4 different options here. Which one should we take? And it's more that, look, product people who have been through it before can look at these 4 different options. Okay, we want to go enterprise, or we want to go B2B, or we're thinking about spinning out a B2C app. It's sometimes better to get the sounding board, an experienced viewpoint on what to do and why before you go just test it out. Yeah, it's always good to build something, put it into a market and test it out, but it's also good to get experienced viewpoint on, okay, we've got 4 options, which 2 should we go for, or which 2 should we test, or which 1 should we test? And it's usually the experience that comes with, like, I've done it before, here's what I would advise, but again, I'm just advising, I'm not telling you should do this, but here's what I would advise you do, here's why, here's how you can do it. And that's the kind of stuff I usually kind of come in and help, more hands-on, less on the board level.
Yeah.
But Yeah, exactly.
doing.
Actually doing, and I'd say, look, okay, here, I would actually say, come up with those two avenues, right? Why haven't you thought about going B2B? Like, here's how you can do it. Here's a market that's already available. I can do the research for you, and here's maybe a go-to-market strategy with a like 6-month roadmap. Give them all the artifacts, but in a board position, I would just walk through what that looks like. The first maybe 1 or 2 steps, and then their dedicated product person will go off and do the research and then put a roadmap together. So I think that's maybe the difference.
Okay.
I do definitely like. There's no way I can do the latter en masse. So I am interested in being on a board again. Break the fourth wall. Hello, anyone out there? I'm
It's a good advert for you.
hook me up.
Moving on to the world of fintech, why are we so bad in that industry of innovating? Not necessarily potentially new companies, but financial services, banking as a whole.
Yeah.
It's not the best at innovation at times.
Yeah, I think, and I think banks or traditional like TradFi get a bad rap because again, I'll hark back to my computer science experience. Any greenfield development is way easier than brownfield development. Same in housing, and it's the same in financial services. If you're building a house on a plot of land that is basically flat, you can build whatever you want. You can build a house with a basement, with a cinema, with a gym, with a playroom, and a top floor bedroom with French doors. If you've got that dream of a house, but you have to fit it into an existing house, you've already got the foundations, you've already got the brickwork, you've already got a roof. It's a lot more difficult to kind of retrofit a basement, to try and add French doors to a top floor, to kind of push out the extension, all while you're living in that house. And that's what banks have to deal with. A bank still has to run. You still have millions and millions of customers, effectively people who have to live in that house. And then you're saying, well, we're going to take a sledgehammer to this wall, and we're going to push the ceiling out, and we're going to dig out into the basement.
And hope it doesn't come crumbling down.
Hope it doesn't come crumbling down. Still adhere to all the rules and regs. So like an architect comes out and looks at everything, and then again, the lights still need to stay on, even at a point where you might have to turn the electricity off to do something. The analogy is getting thin now.
I like it.
But again, greenfield development is way easier than brownfield, and I think banks also have the additional regulatory. It's not hurdle. It's regulatory adherence, and there's just a lot more people inside a bank. Then there's politics on top of that. So again, going back to the house analogy, let's say you've got kids in one room, they don't want to move rooms, and they can just stay in that room and protest all they want, which means the builders can't get in there to do anything. That's effectively what you get in some of these organizations where, okay, we want to build, let's say, for example, a challenger FX product inside a bank, but you've already got an FX product, let's say it's called Global Money. Then those two are kind of in competition with each other, but they still have to be in the same household, and it gets tricky.
You've hinted to it there. Do you just want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Because I think you did it's about obviously the Zing venture. I saw a load of rubbish on LinkedIn and people just slating it, saying, haha, big banks can't innovate. But I think you're one of the few people who actually put out a rounded viewpoint.
Yeah.
What do you think they did well? What do you think they could have done better?
Yeah. I mean, again, first thing to say is, brownfield development is a lot harder. And the initial strategy that they had, which was, we also acknowledge brownfield development is hard. So we're going to incubate this completely separately. It's going to be its own entity. It's even going to have its own company registration number on company's house. It's its own entity. It's going to have its own tech stack. So I think that's the first thing they did very well. They gave it they gave it funding. I'd say too much money, because I don't think abundance fosters innovation. If you've got, I think it was over 130 million pounds, I think, as part of the project. It's a lot of money to plough into what is effectively a startup that was they were trying to build a fully fleshed out app. And I think there were a few things that they did right early on. Again, founding it separately, understanding the challenges, but I think some of the economics were a bit, probably, I wouldn't say wrong, ambitious. I think they built a product that they thought was going to last 2 or 3 years, or was going to be proven over 2 or 3 years, but they didn't look at, well, we still have to prove it over 6 months.
Yeah.
And we still have to prove internally to HSBC that this is a viable product that has traction, that has viable unit economics. And I think there were a few things like there were very expensive referral program, using a Visa Infinite card. A Visa Infinite card is expensive. It's like the top end card that Visa, one of the top end cards that Visa has in their stack. It's expensive to produce, maintain, and so those are the things I think they got wrong with their product specifically. But also, I wasn't necessarily clear on what market they were going after. Were they going specifically after existing Wise and Revolut customers, or were they trying to attract new customers who are maybe at that decision point between, oh, I might use Wise or Currency or Revolut, or what's this Zing thing? So I wasn't clear on what market they were initially trying to attract. And I think those are just some of the...
Do you think that's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the amount of money that got pumped into it? There almost wasn't a clear ICP. It's just, we'll take anyone because we spent so much, we need users.
Yeah. I think, again, I don't know what I think that was one of the things I speculated in the article, which was, well, I don't know. It's not clear to me what the customer profile looks like, whether they had personas or not, because I'm a HSBC customer, and I wasn't targeted, but I have a Wise account as well, and you would think that if I'm an existing HSBC customer with the Wise account, which you could very easily see, even if you have an open banking connection through Zing, and connected your traditional HSBC account, you can see there's Wise transfers going out from HSBC to a Wise IBAN. So you could easily identify how many HSBC customers have Wise accounts and go, that's our target market, we're going to switch them over. Here's how we're going to switch them over, more favourable rates. We'll give them some sort of incentive to switch over the first 6 months, given specific spend. And I think that those were a couple of things that I would have done if I was there. I would have gone, look, what's the average amount that we can maybe give to the customer, and what's with some spending tiers. And if they go on holiday and spend £500, we basically break even on the card within 3 months. I think the economics were where they struggled, and then you add on to that the politics, which I think is the biggest reason why it got canned. Is leadership team changed over, CEO changed over. I use another analogy. You've got a football team, you've got a new manager. The new manager will bring in their own players, and they might look at older players who were successful under the previous manager and say, they're not for me. They really, like, the old manager really loved that player, but I'm going in a different direction. And so you bench the player, and then the player decides to leave. I think it's the same sort of thing. I think.
Sadly, I think if you're coming in at that level as a CEO, it's a very easy decision to make, isn't it? To make immediate impact on P&L.
Yeah, that's
it's very easy to look good straight away by culling something like that. Sadly, but
and I think if the economics were a bit better, I think if they looked better on paper, that look, okay, we've put. And they didn't even put the full money in there, by the way. People say, oh, they spent 150 million.
Yeah, we don't actually know that.
Yeah, if you go on Companies House, it's not clear that they did spend 150. It's clear they spent around 40 to 50 million. It's not clear they spent the full 150 million. Not that, I mean, we're talking about stupid numbers anyway. kind of crazy numbers.
It's fine.
Yeah, but I think if the economics and the customer growth was there, and they were saying, look, average customer spend is going up, customer onboarding rates are going up, so all we need to do is like cut one of these referral programs and then economics stack up, then maybe they would have looked at it more favorably. But I think at that point where it's 8 or 9 months in, and they clearly made the decision in like September, October, the unit economics probably didn't make sense then, and that's when it was an easier decision. And I guess, if you're a new CEO, you're probably like, well, I could kill it now, or I could let it go on and maybe it'll be successful, and then that it won't be my success, it'll be someone else's success. And I think that's where some of the politics comes in.
Yeah, I think the one thing though, like you've said before, it's very hard to build on brownfield. So they did the complete opposite and gave it a go building something greenfield,
Yeah.
completely separate, which is that the only way traditional finance companies can compete with your challengers? Do you think?
I mean, it's hit and miss. There've been success stories. So there are success stories and there are failures. So there's RBS's Bow is a bit of a failure, and they did the same sort of thing as HSBC did, incubated separately, a separate product, not connect to our existing stack, and it failed. So it's hit and miss. I think the more successful products, its product is more likely to be successful if you do incubate it separately, because you're just giving it that extra chance of, we know it's difficult to do brownfield. We're trying to remove as much of the politics as possible, and you're kind of mitigating some of that risk by making it a greenfield product. But then you're also adding, I think the trade-off is you're adding costs, right? So if you make a greenfield product, right, we can't even leverage our own tech stack because we don't want to, because we don't want the politics. So we now have to go out to Visa and Currency Cloud and use XYB and use these 4 or 5 providers, which does add costs, increased costs to the stack. And then especially if you're a bank and you go to one of these providers, they know that you're a bank coming to them, right? You don't give startup prices to.
There's a lot more zeros on that.
There's a lot more zeros.
Yeah.
I think, again, I don't know this for certain, but if you're a salesperson at a provider and HSBC comes to you, you're probably like, okay, this usually costs 100 grand, but for you it's 10x that. I think you have to stack that up. But I think if you're a bank trying to innovate, that is the best route to innovate new products from my perspective.
How can they compete then? Obviously, they could innovate. Are they at risk of being not destroyed because they've got such a large customer base, but that's slowly being eroded over time?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at the numbers. I think it is slowly being eroded at time, but I think the environment is slightly different. Like, people don't usually have single bank relationships now. Like, everyone is multi-banked, and you might still have the primary account, but the primary relationship is becoming eroded. But as long as your bank is still your primary, however eroded that becomes, the bank is still valuable, because the bank will still have that mass of customers. They can lend, they can balance sheet lend, and I think lots of startups still want to partner with banks because the startup route is fraught with risk. So a few companies I've worked with and for have looked at bank partnerships, embedded finance propositions, because again, banks have that large customer base. Customer acquisition is tough. You could have the best product in the world, and if no one knows about it, you could be dead in the water. So you have to build a great product, but you have to acquire customers, but acquiring customers is expensive. So your best like long-term route or medium-term route is build a great product, acquire some customers, prove the proposition, and then partner with someone who already has 30 million SMEs, for example, like Lloyds does. Barclays, similar sort of numbers. So that's why I think embedded finance is hot.
Yeah.
Because it solves that problem. It solves a problem for the bank, because the bank wants to innovate. It solves a problem for the fintech, because the fintech wants to acquire customers. And it solves a problem for the customer, which is access to, for SMEs, it's access to finance. But for consumers, it's just access to more tools that they can use to manage their finances.
Do you see that being as a partnership, or that startup eventually being bought and acquired, like a NatWest Cushion?
Yeah, it's becoming more of the latter, like HSBC Ember, for example. It's becoming more and more of the latter. There's more acqui investments. It's like, put 5 million investment in, but we have a route to maybe fully acquire you. And the 5 million investment is contingent on you baking your product into our stack. So banks are doing more and more of that. And maybe that was just during that 2 or 3 year period where investment was kind of fallow. Maybe we'll see a change to that over the next couple of years when investment flows start to increase. But I think, yeah, for a bank, I think it's going to be more of the latter, which is, look, why are we basically embedding this product? We should own the product, and we can have more control on what the future direction of the product is, how it impacts our customers, and I think that will be the route forwards for banks.
Okay. You mentioned embedded finance as a hot thing to watch.
Yeah.
I know one of your fintech R&R posts was around things to watch within fintech in 2025. What else?
Things to watch in fintech in 2025.
One of them was on accessibility
Yeah.
across Europe.
Yeah. So accessibility is a great point. I think we can go back to what leads to innovation. One of the things that leads to innovation is, and it's what we've seen over the
Regulations.
past regulation. Yeah, exactly. EU Accessibility Act, I think it's coming in June, July, and it's more of a lightning rod of change for companies. So I think latter part of last year we saw Monzo and Bunk add British Sign Language functionality to all their call centres and have video calls with BSL embedded. I think we're going to see more and more of that, and I think that's one of the trends for this year and probably next year as that regulation comes in. I can't remember what else I put in there.
It doesn't have to be in that article, but what do you think for this year?
I mean, one thing I would love to see is open banking interoperability across region. I think there's lots of issues that people crossing borders face. One of them is like things like credit files. When you hop over a border, you're basically like a completely new person almost.
Yes.
There's no interoperability of that. There's no interoperability of account information. If you're a student coming from a faraway country to study in the UK and you want to get a credit card, which based on student fees, you kind of have to unless you're rich. How do you get a credit card?
Yep.
You have no credit presence. And I think open banking interoperability and access to account information from other countries and having more of a homogeneous protocol across at least more regions would be great. That's one thing I'd love to see. I think the Middle East is doing a bit on that. They are working more closely to create an interoperable framework so that Qatar's open banking framework works with Saudis, works with UAEs, works with Bahrain's, which means people can move around more easily, have better access to financial services faster. And I think that's one thing I'd love to see.
Is it a tech problem to solve or more of a geopolitical one?
It's a bit of both. It's a tech problem. It's a
solution.
It's a regulatory problem. It's almost sometimes it's an implementation problem. Like the UK had a bit of a problem with that because our framework isn't fully interoperable. You can't just it's not even interoperable, I guess, between organisations to a degree. That's why you've got TSPs who sit below, and they are the connector. Because ideally, if open banking framework was perfect and the API was great and completely transparent, I would be able to go build to that standard and pull in all of the bank's info. But you can't really. You need a TSP to have that connection to provide homogeneous data set. And you can't do it because the standards aren't standard really across banks. That's the issue. But I think new frameworks are looking at some of those lessons and building interoperability into their protocols, which is great.
If you were to start a fintech business, what area, or if somebody wants to start a fintech business, what area would you say they should be looking at right now?
There's so many. SME finance is the one I usually go to because despite the amount of innovation in SME banking, finance, analytics, there's still a massive financing gap. So I'd say something that like a SME finance super connector, and I think there have been some organisations that tried to build it, but something where any SME could just send their account information to this provider and then just be sent back like, here are all the finance deals you're eligible for. And I think it's all very decoupled. So you have 15 different SME finance fintechs, but you have to apply to all 15 individually. And you also have to know if you're eligible before you go through the application process, otherwise you're wasting a lot of time. So I think something maybe in between. So an SME, some sort of SME finance connector will be great.
Okay.
And the market is there. SME, I always look at the stats from, I think it's the FS, Federation of Small Business, and the numbers of SMEs being set up every year is always up, apart from the COVID period where we had it was a drop off, but it was more flat, where it's the first year in 40 or 50 years where we hadn't seen SME growth year on year. Usually there's SME growth every single year consistently. So the chart is going like that. So the market is always there. There's always businesses being set up, and businesses always need finance to grow. So I think that's...
I guess with AI, that's only going to grow. People can easily set up a business now.
Yeah.
Smaller business.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see more of those small businesses across all industries?
Yeah,
rather
for sure.
than large, massive organisations, people just wanting to go off and set up on their own, doing probably the same job but for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we look at that chart in 2 years' time, we just see a massive spike that goes like vertically upwards, because you can spin up a business, within a few minutes. You could set up an entity on a company's house. All the regulatory process is quite simple, and then you could set up an e-commerce business by setting up a website in Framer, like hooking into a Stripe API to take payments, have a just-in-time process set up, and like have inventory of, I don't know, like bespoke glasses, for example. And you can set up a business within a day and have customers within a day and have orders shipped out within a day. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that, and people just like bringing their own ideas to the table and setting them up.
And have you seen who was it, Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley?
Yeah. That's why I'm wearing black.
Yeah. But obviously they're coming from completely polar opposite ends of the spectrum. One saying entrepreneurship, people should set up their own business, go on their own.
Yeah.
The other saying, no, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you think it's dangerous for everybody to try and set up these small businesses, or a good thing?
It depends on the intent of the person setting up the business. If the intent of the person setting up the business is, I really believe in what I'm doing, I really love what I'm doing, I want to create bespoke glasses or whittled wood objects or ornaments.
Is that your next business?
No, I'm thinking about it. I think if that is your passion, then there's no reason why you shouldn't. If your objective is, I'm doing this to make money, then I'd say it is risky. And I think there's lots of people who set up businesses just purely to make money, and that's fine. That's capitalism. But as a product person, I believe you still have to provide some innate value beyond, I don't care about creating value. I'll try and create some value, but that's secondary to making money. I think if that's flipped around, it's a better model.
Yeah.
And Gary Stevenson was I didn't work with Gary Stevenson, but Gary Stevenson was on the floor.
Think of that. Yeah.
He was on the floor below me at Citibank, so I know a few people.
Was he the best trader in the world?
I don't really. I always question that, because again, I worked in a technology team, so I'm like slightly abstracted, and he was in currency trading, and I was in fixed income. So I think he was on first floor. Fixed income was on floor 2 in Citigroup Centre, which is in Canary Wharf.
Yeah.
So I think he was on first floor and I was on second floor mostly. But I never heard anything about best trader in the world. But you could, I guess, if your financials stack up, if you're reporting to your manager and your manager's saying, yeah, your P&L is highest among all the traders on the desk, then I guess you could call yourself the best trader in the world. But by what metric?
Can you call yourself the best fintech product leader in the world? You could, off some metrics, I'm sure.
Yeah, on I don't know what those metrics would be. I guess like products delivered, I guess is a good one. But yeah, I think people call themselves the best. Insert word here based on like followers and interactions and likes and influence. It's
vanity metrics.
Yeah, vanity metrics, exactly. I think maybe the Gary argument is a vanity metric, but I am on Gary's side in the argument. I'm not on Daniel's Priestley's side, because, I mean, without getting too much into politics, estate management and inheritance tax is different to income tax.
Yeah.
So if you already have a £60 million estate, you have a £60 million estate. Like I would have to work 300 years to get the money to have a £60 million estate. This person's already got one. So let's not talk about the tax on an estate you already have and have been given, and I think he talks about apples and apples. Yeah, that's not apples and apples. The argument he raised was not Right.
Yeah.
Rant over.
Do you feel better for that?
I feel better, yeah.
Obviously, talking about people setting up their own business, I guess in a way that is what you've done as going out as a consultant. What's been the hardest part of that journey of going from permanent employment to consultant?
Realizing that you need to do sales, and as someone again who's engineering background and then moved into product and hasn't really done any selling, especially of themselves, that's probably the hardest thing I found. Sales and marketing, it's just it was when I started, it was an area I had pretty much zero experience in, but it's been a very sharp learning curve, but a good one. Yeah, that's the main reason I set up the newsletter. Probably one of the reasons I'm on this pod.
Yep.
As a result of getting my name out there a bit more, and actually talking about some of the work I've done, rather than just doing some work and then moving on to the next project. I think that's probably one of the hardest things, but yeah, it's a necessary.
Yeah, I think it's often overlooked by people, and it's just, I'm going to go contracting. Great.
Yeah.
But the reality is, sales is very hard.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done it for quite a few years now. It's a very hard job.
Yeah, it's a very hard job. I mean, you're very good at it. I have to. I have to say, and this is not
I'll
in
send
any.
you that £20 later.
It's not in any script, but I think you're right. People, I get it all the time where someone is or it was in a permanent role, and they're like, oh, you consult, you work for yourself. Like, oh, I'm thinking about doing it, and I'm like, okay, deep breath, like deep inhale in. You're thinking about doing. Why are you thinking about doing it? And often the answer is, oh, I want more freedom, but I think I can make more money doing it. I'm like, if you've already got a really great network of people who are asking you to work for them on a consulting basis, cool, then you're probably likely to be successful. But if you're just about to start this journey and you've left a role or you quit a role to do it, which is actually how I exactly how I started. I quit my role at Fidelity and then I was like, what do I want to do now? And it was, I want to build more stuff en masse rather than just focusing on one product every 3 years. So as long as you have that focus, you have the network already, and you have a pipeline of work, go do it. But it's, and if you don't have that, think about how you're going to build a pipeline while you're already working at an existing company, getting a salary, because your runway will run out very quickly. And you realize that sales and marketing is long tail. It's not, oh, I can speak to 7 of my contacts and win work. Really, you need to be speaking to 100 contacts to win one bit of work. That's the reality. So yeah, if you're thinking about doing it, start the process while you're already working, like build out your network a bit more, drop some feelers and, ask people about what they're working on, what challenges they face, and try and apply your experience to that situation and be like, oh, how could I potentially help that person, that organization, that startup, that company as a consultant? And then start to make headway in that direction. I wouldn't advise quitting. Yeah, quitting or
Would you do that differently now?
Yeah, I wouldn't have quit. Yeah, I wouldn't have quit for sure, especially just before the next bonus was coming. yeah. The standard city process is wait for your bonus to come, and there's just a wave of resignations.
You just decided to buck the trend.
Yeah. I wouldn't do that again. Yeah.
What's the part of it you enjoy most now? Like, obviously, you said you wanted to deliver lots of different products en masse.
Yeah.
Have you actually enjoyed doing that?
Yeah. The hardest thing about that is context switching. So I'll work with maybe three different organizations simultaneously. So context switching is tough, but I like solving problems and like trying to help organizations create solutions and sometimes just create those solutions myself. So that's the part of the job I love. And, as a consultant, I get to do that for multiple products, which is great. But context switching is hard, and that's another probably
new skill you've learned.
It's a new skill I've learned, and applying those fundamentals to those products, and also just applying them to yourself. It's like using your own product principles to manage your own projects. For example, even like writing a newsletter, it has to go through a process. Think of the idea, validate it, do some research, review it. All of that stuff applies.
Awesome. And then Do you think that maybe that everybody wants to call themselves fractional these days? It just seems to be a fun new buzzword. But for the CEO, founder, CTO, whoever it might be, that is that product person, do you think having that fractional support could potentially be the answer, rather than just waiting until further down the line and hiring that product team, just getting some advice early doors?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the benefit of the fractional role is, again, it's fractional. It's not. I'm not paying 6 months up front for one headcount, and then like a perm headcount is often way more expensive than a contractor anymore, or a consultant, or a fractional person. So I think it's super valuable, especially when you've got a CTO and maybe a CPO who's not as experienced and who's doing some learning on the job. I think those are the situations, those are the organisations where it's most valuable. And like new product development, where you don't necessarily want to have the full outlay on a CPO, and where it's a CTO and a CEO. I think those are the situations where it's super relevant. And you can get someone in for a day, half a day, a week, and just go, look, we've got a roadmap, we've got a strategy deck, we've got a pitch deck. Here's what we've started building. Here's our backlog. Can you do a review? And I've done it before, where I've just done it's just I call it a product health check, where I'm like, right, here is red, amber, green status on strategy, resourcing, technology, market, metrics, backlog, all of that stuff, and just rank it in terms of, here's what I've observed, here's what's great, here's what's okay, here's what needs to probably be addressed, here's what you would do, here's what I would do, and you can get me to do it, or you can do it yourself. And I've done those, like, it's like a 10-page PDF and just send it.
Really valuable for, in reality, low investment, getting a lot out of it for an early stage business.
Yeah.
Do you find they actually listen?
Lots do. I think they listen and they hear, but I guess there's always other challenges.
It's whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Yeah,
Brennan aside.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so much stuff to do. It's like, oh, what do I focus on this? Do I focus on that? But having it there, at least you can refer back to it, and you could say, look, oh, here's some reason why we should do this. Here's some evidence-based research on why we should prioritize this thing over that thing, and here's some market research to why there's a market for this thing versus this thing we've prioritized. So let's switch them around. But it's investment dependent, it's timing dependent. Lots of the early stage startups, what I always say is, you will have an idea of what you want to build, and then you might start building it, and then you'll get a client who is slightly off that track that you're aiming towards. Build to what the client wants. Unless you're an absolute purist, you still need revenue. Like, don't think like, oh, I'm an evangelist, I have to build a perfect product. You could build a perfect product, but if there's no revenue there, and there's no client at the end of it, and there's no real end user, if it's a B2B product, for example, then again, the product won't exist in a year. So it's kind of irrelevant. So always, like, if you get a client, if you get the opportunity to win a client, and you have to slightly deviate, and you can always come back later on.
I think that is a potential hurdle sometimes for companies that are very tech focused early on, and almost want to build the perfect tech solution.
Yeah.
But are forgetting that key element that if you don't have revenue, you don't have business.
Yeah. The short answer is yeah.
Yes,
that is
correct.
That is correct. Yeah.
Awesome. So one thing I wanted to cover before we finish, I guess the key reason people bring you in is for your experience and to guide them.
Yeah.
A lot of that, I'm guessing, is coming down to what you've seen done well and mistakes you've made in the past.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake you've made that you're happy to share?
Yeah, there've been a few,
Don't say that.
Well, I mean, you have to make.
No, you have to make mistakes. It's the only way you really learn.
Well, exactly. Yeah. The biggest one that I've probably made for the first 10-ish years of my career, and my manager at Schroders she kind of brought it to the forefront when I was going through the performance review process. Was, oh, you do great work, everyone you interact with, all of the stakeholders really love you, but no one above that level knows who you are. Like, no one at that level knows what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing this, and so I can't give you, I can't put you up for this next promotion because like I have to justify it to all of my level, which is up here. So you have to make yourself more visible, and that will also help you win battles when it's, oh, I want to make this change, but I have to go to this manager to make this change, or something's gone wrong and I need to explain to this person why it's gone wrong. So it's that relationship building early on in my career, like even at Citibank and at lots of that period at Schroders. But my manager was like, you need to be better at making yourself more visible because this will help you address problems and, you know, progress your career, but also it'll enable you to build bigger projects inside the organization. And I think this goes back to the Zing point, building relationships and like understanding the politics of things and understanding who owns what, why, and kind of like even taking people out for dinner after work. It's like the underground.
It seems small, but can have a huge impact.
Yeah, it seems really small, but like you said, massive impact. And even on like repeat work, for example, like lots of the work I do is work that I've done and then someone refers me. I think you get that through relationship building. So definitely the biggest mistake I've made very early on, and then even sometimes now, like deciding not to go to an event because, you know, like my social battery is low. You still have to go to those events to build relationships, to kind of be out there, but also understand what everyone is doing, and that helps build products, but also helps win work and helps influence in certain areas.
Awesome, good advice. Well, Jas, thank you very much. If people want to get in touch, where's best for them to find you, follow you, find your wisdom?
LinkedIn, basically where I exclusively live.
Yeah.
No, LinkedIn, Substack, where I write every couple of weeks. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.